Now, here are your hosts, Janet Hickox and Roger Wetzel.
Hello, and welcome to Empower You Media. I'm Roger Wetzel, and I'm joined by my co-host, Janet Hickox. Hello, Janet.
Hey, Roger. How's it going?
Good. How are you today?
Well, I'm doing great. Thank you.
Good. Excellent. Well, today we're going to be talking about a paradigm shift as it relates to brain health and aging. And our guest is Dr. Brant Cortright, whose new book, The NEUROGENESIS Diet and Lifestyle, Upgrade Your Brain, Upgrade Your Life, has just hit the shelves. Dr. Cortright is a highly respected clinical psychologist and professor of psychology at California Institute of Integral Studies. His consulting practice specializes in cutting-edge brain health and neuroscience, informed depth psychology. He is the author of 2 previous books and lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. Welcome to Empower You TV, Dr. Cortright.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you for being here. It's going to be an awesome show today.
So before we get started, guys, I looked up some really interesting facts about Alzheimer's from the Alzheimer's Association website. And so here's what I discovered. About 2/3 of Americans with Alzheimer's are women. Interesting. 1 in 3 seniors dies with Alzheimer's or dementia. And Alzheimer's is the 6th leading cause of death in the United States. And then, Roger, for us in Washington State, the numbers are even worse. In Washington State, it's the 3rd leading cause of death. And we're the 3rd highest Alzheimer's death rates in America, here just in Washington State. And there's been an 82% increase in Alzheimer's deaths since 2000. That's absolutely incredible. But perhaps the scariest statistic of all is this one. Alzheimer's is the only cause of death, in the top 10 causes of death, that is, that cannot be prevented, cured, or slowed. I sure hope this isn't true. So let me throw this to you, Dr. Cortright, because I know your book is based on this. What do you make of that last statement? And tell us what neurogenesis is.
Okay, good. So neurogenesis is the process of making new brain cells. It's the birth of new brain cells, generating new neurons. And it used to be believed that we stopped making new brain cells in our early 20s. And after that, it was just a slow die-off of brain cells. But then they realized that, this is only in the late 1990s, that actually we do make new brain cells throughout our entire life. Now, at first I didn't know what to make of that, but the last few years it's become clear that actually our rate of neurogenesis has an immense impact on the quality of our life and the quality of our brain.
Mm-hmm.
So a low rate of neurogenesis, that is a low rate at which our brain makes new brain cells, is associated with cognitive decline, with memory problems, with anxiety, stress, and depression. As well as lowered immunity. And high rates of neurogenesis, high rates at which the brain makes new brain cells, are associated with just the opposite: cognitive enhancement, rapid learning, rapid problem solving, robust emotional resilience, protection against stress, anxiety, and depression, as well as enhanced immunity. And so it turns out that just about all of us in this very neurotoxic world of ours have rates of neurogenesis well below what they could be. Most everybody can increase their rate of neurogenesis by 5 times with dramatic improvements on every level of our being: body, heart, mind, spirit. Now, the stuff you raised about Alzheimer's at the beginning is very interesting and very disturbing, because on that same website that you talked about, it also says that if present trend lines continue, within just a few years, half of everybody who reaches the age of 85 will have Alzheimer's. And since most of us are expected to live to be 85, that's a pretty scary figure. And right now, that's right. There is nothing that seems like it can slow it down, reverse it, prevent it, cure it. The symptoms can be managed for a few months. That's all. It's pretty bleak right now. And in fact, the pharmaceutical companies have spent billions of dollars on drug trials trying to come up with something to affect the course of Alzheimer's. Literally billions of dollars, hundreds of drug trials. And so far, it's been an absolute failure. They've come up with nothing. Zip, zero. So this looks pretty bleak. However, there is some good news here. And the good news comes out of new research done from a holistic perspective. So this book, the Neurogenesis Diet and Lifestyle, is a holistic approach to brain health.
Here's the book, just in case.
Yes. Meaning it's body, heart, mind, spirit. So every level of our consciousness we experience through the brain, right? Physically, every sensation, emotionally, every feeling, every desire, every thought, every spiritual state. We experience everything through the brain. And so each of these levels, body, heart, and mind and spirit, they all come to us through the brain. Now, most of the research in Alzheimer's, in fact, most research around the brain, are done by good drug companies and done by academic researchers looking to find the next big drug that they can make a lot of money on.
And the next $1 billion.
Exactly. Very little research.
And the next long list of side effects.
Exactly.
They cause death.
And very little research gets done from a holistic perspective because most of the things you use are free. Nobody can patent anything there.
Sure.
But there's a few organizations that are doing holistic research. So here in California, there's something called the Buck Institute on Aging. And late last year, they published a study that showed that they actually did reverse the cognitive decline associated with Alzheimer's. And they did a kind of simplified version of the holistic approach presented in this book. And they found that they were able to reverse the memory loss and cognitive decline, and that people who had to stop working because of memory loss and cognitive decline were able to go back into their jobs for the 2 years that they followed them in this study. And then a few months ago, another study was published out of Finland. This was the first randomized controlled study, Finnish study, that again did a very, very simplified holistic approach that is done in this book. It's a very simplified version of the book. And they also found that for people who were at risk of cognitive decline, elderly people, doing this holistic approach, they were able to, during the 2 years that they tracked them, this at-risk group did not develop cognitive decline. So it looks like actually there is real hope here. And the hope comes from a holistic approach. Body, heart, mind, spirit, like everything works together. Just doing one thing alone has very limited impact on the brain. But body, heart, mind, spirit, using all of these together has a synergistic effect and is very helpful for the brain.
That's interesting. A couple of things. Number one, I don't even know where I heard this, but it was recently where they've been doing studies with ultrasound, and they've been able to actually use that to break up the plaque in the brain. Which, and I don't know how far along that is, or what their plan is with that. But I thought that was interesting. But Kathleen, my wife, her father has dementia, Alzheimer's, and then her sister has early onset. I think her sister is 54. So it's going to be interesting. I'm interested to get this information into their hands and see what they can do with it.
Yeah.
But I have another question: as why is neurogenesis a revolutionary discovery, and how is this changing the paradigm of understanding the brain?
Yeah, good. So again, it was considered gospel that the brain stopped growing new brain cells in our early 20s. So the discovery that actually we produce new brain cells throughout our entire life has completely upended this view of the brain, that the brain is always remodeling itself, rejuvenating itself, renewing itself. Alzheimer's is something that begins decades before we actually see symptoms. Like 20, 30 years beforehand, damage is starting to happen to the brain. It's becoming more and more clear that Alzheimer's is really a lifestyle disease, that there are many things in this neurotoxic world of ours that contribute to it. We'll get into that in a bit. But neurogenesis is a game changer because we can increase our rate of neurogenesis by 5 times in our 20s, in our 30s, in our 40s, our 50s, even our 60s. In our 70s and 80s, when we get much older, we can increase our rate of neurogenesis 3 to 5 times. And since that research was done, they've actually discovered a bunch of other things that increase our rate of neurogenesis that weren't part of this experiment. So maybe we can increase the rate of neurogenesis by 8 times or 10 times. We actually don't even know what the possibilities are. We do know that virtually everybody in the world is operating at a suboptimal level. Right? We used to think that either your brain was healthy or it was diseased or damaged in some way. And we now know that what we called healthy is just average, and that average is actually well below what is possible. They did an experiment with mice where they gave them this kind of holistic treatment. So they called it an enriched environment. Holistic treatment is really my vocabulary. So they gave them things like our running wheels to exercise on. They gave them lots of nesting materials and novel environments to explore. They gave them lots of other friendly mice to mate with and to play with. And they increased their rate of neurogenesis by 5 times. And they discovered that these mice became kind of like super mice, right? They had big cognitive advantages over their normal neurogenesis rate peers. And they also had robust physical health, and they also had big emotional advantages over their normal neurogenesis rate peers. They were protected, not absolutely protected, but they were hugely protected against stress, anxiety, and depression. And so I think this is just hugely important for all of us, that our brain, it's like the quality of our life is determined by the quality of our brain. And we think we've got a good quality of life, but actually it could be much better as we change our brain, as we upgrade our brain.
It's interesting, Janet. Brant, we interviewed Lynn McTaggart a couple of weeks ago, and she was talking about what you're talking about in respect to how people who were part of a group, how their life, how healthy they were, healthier, they were emotionally stronger and better off, less depression, all of those kind of things. So what you're saying basically dovetails with what she wrote about in her book, The Bond. So I find that really interesting.
Yeah.
What I find really interesting is whatever caused scientists to believe that the brain stopped growing or that it stopped creating new cells. Where did that start?
That's a good question. That came from an early neuroscientist in the early 1900s, and it just became gospel. And part of it was that they didn't have good enough technology to do the brain imaging and to actually see, oh yes, we actually do have new brain cells. That technology is very, very new. It was really just developed in the 1980s and 90s and got really applied to human beings in the late 1990s.
So in the late 1980s and 90s, that's when we kind of began the process of understanding the brain maybe a little more?
Yes.
because
And
we could see what was going on.
that's right. This revolution in neuroimaging has really opened up the brain. There's still so much we don't know. We don't know vastly much more than we do now, but we know a lot more than we did before.
Yeah.
Yes.
I noticed in the book that you described the brain as sort of flowing, almost as, an alive organism, which obviously it's part of the body, but I don't think we as humans normally think of our brain in that respect. So there's this health quality in the brain that is, like you said, holistic. Why has it taken us so long to recognize the role of holistic beliefs in how we treat the human body?
Can I interrupt before you answer that? We need to go to a break, and after the break, you can answer that question. So we'll be right back.